his match in sexual vitality, they come together like forces of nature. Enkidu gluts on her richness and abandons his innocence for her own brand of wildness, an artful and deceitful sexuality. First, she exhausts him, then she makes a man of him, a bread-eater and a killer. He is now ready, like any thug, to wrestle with the king and lose. He is reduced to Gilgamesh's hireling, his axe, his shadow. I am weak, Enkidu laments. My arms have lost their strength. The cry of sorrow sticks in my throat. Debased, robbed of selfhood, Enkidu is prepared to destroy everything he loves. When he dies, it will be in shame. He will say, "Once I ran for the water of life, and now I have nothing." The luminous dreaming of the story's beginning collapses into nightmare. Enkidu and Gilgamesh set off together to destroy the cedar forest, its tree of life, which Gilgamesh will have made into a door, and Humbaba, the forest's ferocious protector. Like the rich domains Herodotus describes weeping incense and rife with beasts, the forest grows on a mountain. The cedar mountain is not only home to all the gods, including those who engendered both men, but it stands above the palace of Urkala, the queen of darkness. The place of all our darkest fears and greatest potencies, it exemplifies the unconscious mind. It is, the text tells us, the place from which dreams are sent to men. And on the journey, Gilgamesh will not cease to dream. These dreams will never encourage them, but will always be warnings of the mortal damage they are about to inflict upon themselves and their world. And it is no accident that once the forest has been destroyed, torn up by its roots, Gilgamesh will fall speechless to the ground, weighted down in the terrible dark of a dreamless sleep. Quote, I seized hold of a wild bull in the wilderness. It bellowed and beat up the dust till the whole sky was dark. My arm was seized, my tongue bitten. I dreamed again. We stood in a deep gorge of the mountain, and beside it we two were like the smallest of swamp flies, and suddenly the mountain fell. It struck me. Driven by the fear of his own eclipse, Gilgamesh pushes on, eager when Enkidu, now nothing more than the embodiment of the king's worst instincts, his demon, reassures him. In his youth, Gilgamesh had seen dead bodies floating in the swollen rivers. He is aware that his glory is nothing more than a breath of wind, and he knows that if he destroys Humbaba, even if he dies in the attempt, his name will persist. This is what fatally drives Gilgamesh, the idea of an interminable name. And there is something else, a kind of helpless rage and fearfulness. Gilgamesh can do nothing to evade the underworld. Only the gods have access to heaven. Here, as Enkidu dreams it, is the underworld of Mesopotamia. Submerged in darkness, the dead sit together like blind and flightless ravens with only their wings to hide their nakedness. The dead sit in silence in the dust and the shadows, and they eat clay. This is how Gilgamesh and Enkidu will spend eternity, lamenting in obscurity and capable of reverie. Perhaps this is the real's greatest paradox. It must be dreamed in order to be lived. After all, to dream the other is to dispel the shadows of distrust, and prepare for the initial encounter. Before he falls into the world, the child is dreamed, as is the lover, embraced in a reverie that is the gift of clairvoyance. Or the city one imagines before walking its streets, Paris, Havana, Beirut, Baghdad. When it is dreamed, the real flourishes like a garden, but one must, as Italo Calvino says, dare dream very high dreams. When he was a child of 3, Jorge Luis Borges saw a tiger at the zoo. A delightful little drawing of the tiger, Borges's Aleph, his Zahir, survives. Borges's biographer suggests that the tiger seized his imagination because, like Borges's own father, it was beautiful, impossible to approach, powerful, enigmatic, dangerous perhaps. This tiger became the primary potency that animated that necessary writer's imagination. Which was the tiger that enabled Borges to become Borges? Was it the Javanese, the Balinese, the Caspian? 3 tigers that are now extinct? 3 tigers that have been obscured forever? Quote, in the jail at Nigur, the governor showed him a cell whose floor and vaulted ceiling were covered by a drawing in barbaric colors that time before obliterating had refined of an infinite tiger. It was a tiger composed of many tigers in the most dizzying of ways. It was crisscrossed with tigers, striped with tigers, and contained seas and Himalayas and armies of what resembled other tigers. That's from the Zahir. 5. And now, the current and unfolding manifestations of speculative metaphysics, hyperanimation, and virtual reality offer luminous and any minute now palpable pages in a book of nature unlike any seen before. A book that puts into question not only our received ideas as to the nature of aesthetic experience, but the nature of life itself. Any minute now, we will be confronted not only with splendid experiments in what Carl Sims, the creator of Galapagos and panspermia, the film you saw as you entered the room, and what he calls interactive evolution, but with insights into the very nature of materiality, of mutability, of a world restlessly sparked by organic processes, and of the mind itself. In Sims' Galapagos, 12 computer screens offer stunningly imagined organic forms whose elements evoke and subvert familiar physical boundaries. In this version of Eden, it is not the fittest that survive, but the most beautiful. Perhaps, Sims says, someday the value of simulated examples of evolution will be comparable to the value that Darwin found in the mystical creatures of the Galapagos Islands. An idea extended further by John McCormick, the creator of Turbulence, 95, Universal Zoologies, 99, Eden, 2000, and the Morphogenesis series, 2000 to 2005, whose virtual chimeras, also of acute aesthetic interest, quote, are created through simple algorithmic rules. These rules, he says, might be thought of as the artificial life equivalent of DNA. He continues, and what he says is extraordinary. Quote, a central tenet of artificial life theory holds that we are one individual instance of life, life as we know it, and that there are more general mechanisms that define life, life as it could be. In his recently published Hyperanimation, Digital Images and Virtual Worlds, Robert Bressett says, quote, as science and digital processes converge, there is increased speculation that the modernist vision of a rational functional future comprised of industrial age tools and materials may be superseded by a complex and pervasive form of biotechnology, self-replicating, self-repairing systems modeled after natural processes. These new systems, like human biological systems, would potentially be able to adapt, learn, and evolve, redirecting their design, the design of their creations, toward the organic. Although the joining of biology and digital visualization has important implications, the future significance of any hybrid art form that may result will have far less to do with its technology and more to do with the aesthetic and ethical contributions that emerge. After all, the great art of the Renaissance was not about the science of perspective, but rather about a fresh and life-affirming vision of humanity. Imagine with me an absolute book of unnatural nature, fully immersive, polycentric,